Chapter 941. Zhao Waoqi didn't say anything, but Chang Rijun nodded. He understood who Zhao Waoqi was talking about. It's great, Mr. Shi is participating in the celebration, then our Dharma Protector Pavilion is full of brilliance. Zhao Waoqi's face was full of excitement. David listened on the side. He couldn't understand what the two were saying, and who that Mr. Shi was. But it must be a big man. After all, a high official like Chang Yuanjun is called such a respectful name, so this surname Shi must be unusual. He didn't stay in the residence of the permanent reinforcements for too long. David followed Zhao Waoqi and left. After all, today's celebration feast, there are still many things to be arranged in the Dharma Protector Pavilion. Gate Master Zhao, who is that Mr. Shi you mentioned just now? David asked Zhao Waoqi curiously in the car. Zhao Waoqi drove the car, looked around, and then whispered, Mr. Chen, do you remember that I once told you that there is a very secret department in Kyoto? I remember, you said that this secret department seems to be the official control of the martial arts world. David nodded and said, yes, this Mr. Shi is the external staff of this secret department, but I don't know exactly what position he holds in this secret department, but if Mr. Shi can help you with a word, then the entire Kyoto martial arts world, I am afraid that no one dares to touch you. Zhao Waoqi's words touched David's heart a lot. Although his strength has grown rapidly now, and he can be regarded as a leader among the younger generation, he is really just a drop in the ocean compared to the entire martial arts world. What is this mysterious department? David was very curious about the strength of the people inside. But he knows that as long as he is strong enough, the level of contact will become higher and higher. Back at the Dharma Protector Pavilion, Zhao Waoqi carefully arranged the scene of the celebration party. After knowing that Mr. Shi was also here, Zhao Waoqi became even more attentive. Near noon, cars began to drive to the law enforcement pavilion one after another. They were all relatively ordinary cars, and there were no luxury cars. However, the people who got out of the cars had prominent identities. Zhao Waoqi took David as the host to greet those who came to the celebration party at the door. Even Zhao Waoqi himself didn't know who would attend. The list of invited people was arranged above. Soon, David saw a familiar figure appear. This person was none other than Xuan Yuankai, who had his arm cut off by himself. After getting out of the car, Xuan Yuankai opened the rear door and invited Xuan Yuanrong and Xuan Yuanyan down. Seeing that the Xuan Yuan family members had arrived, both Zhao Wuji and David were slightly taken aback. David, stay safe. Although Xuan Yuankai only had one arm left, the domineering aura on his body did not change at all. Feeling the momentum of Xuan Yuankai, David was a little surprised. He didn't expect this guy to break through to the realm of Wuzong. After returning from Suolong Island for just over a month, Xuan Yuankai broke through from the peak of the Great Master to Wuzong. It's a genius. You really have some ability to kill Ichiro Watanabe, but no matter how talented you are, I will seek revenge for my broken arm. Xuan Yuankai put his face in front of David's face, and said provocatively in his eyes. David looked at Xuan Yuankai indifferently. Master Xuan Yuan, if you are here to participate in the celebration, please come in. If you are here to make trouble, you may have picked the wrong day today. Zhao Waoqi was afraid that David would have a conflict with Xuan Yuankai, so he hurriedly stood between the two and said to Xuan Yuankai. Zhao Waoqi, of course we are here to participate in the celebration. If you want to drive us away, I'm afraid you don't have the qualifications yet. Xuan Yuanrong looked at Zhao Wuji with a sneer on his face and said. Chapter 942. Then please. Zhao Waoqi made a gesture of invitation. Xuan Yuanyan waved his hand, go in. Xuan Yuanyan spoke, and only then did Xuan Yuankai and Xuan Yuanrong walk towards the Protector Pavilion. Dad, after the celebration, the Martial Arts Alliance will not be protecting David anymore. You must avenge me. Xuan Yuankai whispered in Xuan Yuanyan's ear. Shut your mouth, today is not the time to talk about this. Xian Yuanyan glared at Xian Yuankai. On the other side, Zhao Waoqi looked at David and said, Mr. Chen, no matter who is looking for trouble today, you have to restrain your temper, so as not to create a bad impression on Mr. Shi, which will outweigh the gains. David nodded, I understand. Soon, many more people came, all of them from famous sect families in the martial arts world. Such a lineup made Zhao Wuji a little surprised. He didn't know who invited these people. You must know that these people are of prominent status, and it would be difficult to invite them all. Mr. Chen. At this time, Zhao Liguo came with Zhao Chuang, and after seeing David, he hurried up to say hello. You are here too. David was a little strange, who invited you? Zhao Liguo said, we all received notices from the Martial Arts Alliance. I don't know exactly who sent the invitation. David was stunned for a moment, and then said, you guys go first. After Zhao Liguo led Zhao in, Zhao Wuji looked at David, Mr. Chen, this time the celebration will be lively, maybe these guys in the martial arts world heard that Mr. Shi was coming, and all came over to please of. Zhao Waoqi's words made David even more curious about this Mr. Shi. Slowly, many people came, and Zhao Waoqi kept looking at his watch anxiously, he was waiting for this Mr. Shi to appear. At this moment, an extended luxury car appeared, and Zhao Waoqi hurried up to meet him. But when the door opened, a familiar figure came down. Guo Wei, director of the Martial Arts Alliance. After Guo Wei got out of the car, he ignored Zhao Waoqi, but respectfully invited an old man out of the car. The old man was wearing a white robe and his eyes were bright. Although the old man is not young, he is full of aura. Facing this old man, both David and Zhao Waoqi felt a sense of oppression. I wish the leader, welcome and welcome. After seeing the old man, Zhao Waoqi said respectfully, his voice changed a bit. The old man nodded slightly, saying hello to Zhao Waoqi, and then set his eyes on David. Is this David who killed Ichiro Watanabe? The old man pointed at David. Yes, he is David. Zhao Waoqi nodded, then said to David, David, this is the Zhu Zishan Alliance leader of the Martial Arts Alliance. Good luck to the leader. David nodded and said hello. Zhu Zishan snorted and didn't say anything, but followed Guo Wei into the Dharma Protector Pavilion. I wish the leader, what a coincidence. Just when Zhu Zishan was about to enter the Law Enforcement Pavilion, a car suddenly stopped, and then a person got out of the car and greeted Zhu Zishan. Patriarch Long, I didn't expect you to be so late. Zhu Zishan immediately smiled when he saw the greeting. When David saw the person in front of him, a faint murderous intent suddenly erupted from his body. Seemingly feeling the killing intent of David, Long Jingguo looked at David with a smile on his face. This was the first time the two of them looked at each other up close. It's just that Long Jingguo just glanced at David, then turned his eyes away, and followed Zhu Zishan into the Dharma Protector Pavilion while chatting. Chapter 943. Mr. Chen, what's the matter with you? Zhao Wuji, who was beside David, also felt the faint killing intent on David's body, so he asked suspiciously. It's okay. David shook his head. Seeing that David didn't say anything, Zhao Waoqi didn't ask questions. After waiting for a while, the regular reinforcements all arrived, but there was still no sign of Mr. Shi. In the end, Zhao Waoqi and David could only make it inside. Now the hall furnished by the Dharma Protector Pavilion is full of people, and none of them are simple. Some of these people are talking to each other, and some are closing their eyes. Among these people, David also found some familiar figures. Hu Beiqi, the tomb robber, and Cheng Kun of Perak Gate, all came, but David didn't know whether they came with the family, or were they arrested by themselves. Invited. However, among these people, there are no figures of the Bai family and Qin family. Neither Bai Ziashan nor Qin Xiaotian can appear here. It should be that neither the Bai family nor the Qin family are qualified. About half an hour later, the whole noisy hall suddenly became quiet, and a middle-aged man walked in, followed by 4 uniformed people behind the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man exudes a powerful aura that makes people dare not look directly. After seeing this middle-aged man, everyone stood up in unison. When David saw the middle-aged man walking in, his eyes were suddenly rounded, and his face was full of shock. It wasn't that David knew the middle-aged man, but the 4 uniformed people behind the middle-aged man, whom David had met. These 4 people are the 4 people who appeared after David met Longwu for the first time in Kyoto and was rescued by Longwu, and Captain Singh was still among them. At that time, after seeing the means of these 4 people, David had long regarded these people as immortals, but now these people are only the little followers of others. Mr. Shi! Everyone shouted at the middle-aged man. Ha ha ha, I'm sorry, there's a little delay, I'm a little late. Mr. Shi laughed and said, then waved his hand to let everyone sit down. Mr. Chen, this is the Mr. Shi I mentioned, the special department he represents now. Zhao Wuji whispered to David. David nodded. Without Zhao Waoqi's introduction, David could see it. Just the strength of the 4 followers behind Mr. Shi, I am afraid that many people here are not opponents. When the celebration started, Mr. Shi held the manuscript paper and started to say some official words. Although no one liked to hear them, they all sat quietly. After saying some innocuous words, Mr. Shi glanced at David and smiled slightly. Our international competition this time, we can achieve such results and kill that arrogant Ichiro Watanabe. This is all for David's credit. You martial arts circles should also learn more from David. Don't always see the petty profits in front of you, and focus on the country. I know you sect families are used to being unfettered at ordinary times. You don't like to be restricted by joining the official department. I don't force it. After all, everyone has their own aspirations, but I hope you in the martial arts world don't fight and kill for some resources. I heard that you have a lot of sects and aristocratic families to chase and kill David for a dragon crystal. We hold the trials for the martial arts world every year, haven't you got enough resources? Now that David has joined the Law Enforcement Pavilion, he is a member of the official family. I believe all of you here will know the consequences of killing David. Mr. Shi's words instantly made the noise down below. Long Jingwo's face was full of gloom. He could never have imagined that David joined a small law enforcement pavilion and had a bad luck. Mr. Shi was alarmed and spoke for him. At the same time, everyone in the Xian Yuan family was also shocked. Xian Yuan Kai just said that he wanted to seek revenge from David, and now the above said such words directly, and how did the Xian Yuan family deal with David? Chapter 944. Mr. Shi, what do you mean? David can do anything to others, but we can't kill him. At this moment, Xian Yuan Kai, who had broken his arm, stood up and asked a little indignantly. Xian Yuan Kai's words instantly caused everyone to look at him with shock in their eyes. Who is this young man? Dare to question Mr. Shi's words? At this time, the Xian Yuan family's boy, it seems that the Xian Yuan family is going to end. It's really a newborn calf that's not afraid of tigers. Everyone was talking quietly. On the other hand, Xian Yuan Yan was so frightened that cold sweat instantly flowed out. UBA5TARD, quickly sit down for me. Xian Yuan Yan slapped Xian Yuan Kai on the face, and then hurriedly said to Mr. Shi, Mr. Shi, I'm so sorry, the dog is ignorant, and I hope you don't get angry. Patriarch Xian Yuan, it's okay, let your son finish the sentence. I think your son is already a Wuzong at a young age, and his talent is good. Mr. Shi was not angry, but said with a smile on his face. Xian Yuan Yan was about to say something, but Xian Yuan Kai said first, Mr. Shi, David broke my arm, and I have to avenge this revenge. You protect him so much now, how can we convince us in the martial arts world? Beast! When Xian Yuan Yan heard Xian Yuan Kai's words, his whole body trembled with anger, and he slapped Xian Yuan Kai with a palm. Stop! Mr. Shi's face turned slightly cold, and then with a slight wave of his palm, Xian Yuanyan's body directly leaned back and sat back in his seat. You must know that this Xuan Yuanyan is a rank 7 martial sect. With such strength, it is no problem to walk in the air, but he is like driving flies away by Mr. Shi. He waved his hand and let Xuan Yuanyan sit directly. Went back. David watched this scene, and his heart was extremely shocked. It seemed that the road of cultivation was never ending. If you want to have the right to speak and be respected, you must have your own strength. At this time, David had never been so eager for strength. Do it casually in front of me, when I don't exist. Mr. Shi's words made Xuan Yuanyan sweat instantly, and the atmosphere in the entire hall instantly became extremely tense. Mr. Shi, I don't dare, I don't dare, Xian Yuanyan wiped his cold sweat and said. Young man, don't be afraid, if there is anything you are not satisfied with, continue to say. Mr. Shi looked at Xian Yuankai and said with a smile. I have no other dissatisfaction. Xuan Yuankai shook his head. Just now, he was too hot for a while. He stood up and questioned Mr. Shi. Now that Xuan Yuankai has calmed down, he was already scared to death. Since there is nothing else, then I will explain to you that I will never cover up anyone. What I hope is that the martial arts world can follow the rules, healthy competition and development, rather than fighting and killing each other for a little resource. If you have a conflict, then follow the rules of the martial arts world. What is the purpose of the martial arts alliance? Mr. Shi said, turning his head to look at Zhu Zishan. Leader Zhu, you said that the purpose of your martial arts alliance is to establish it what? Zhu Zishan hurriedly got up and said, Mr. Shi, the purpose of our martial arts alliance is to maintain the order of martial arts and punish evil and cultivating demons. Okay, can your martial arts alliance handle what this young man just proposed? Mr. Shi asked. Yes, I will definitely handle it properly. If there is a conflict between the two sides, we can follow the rules of the martial arts world and fight each other. Life and death are fate, and we must never seek personal revenge outside the arena. Zhu Zishan hurriedly nodded. Well, all things are done according to the rules, and there are not so many contradictions. Don't think that I don't know what you are thinking. Sometimes, I just don't care about you. Mr. Shi's eyes swept across the people present. These big figures of the sect family all bowed their heads, and no one dared to speak. Chapter 945. Mr. Shi's lesson is right, I will strengthen the order of the martial arts world in the future. Zhu Zishan kept nodding his head. There is one more thing, I want to tell you, this year's trial, because I haven't found a secret realm and relic suitable for the trial, so it may be postponed. Is there anything to try? Mr. Shi said lightly. As soon as the trial was postponed, everyone was in a commotion, and they began to chat with each other. At this time, Zhao Liguo looked at David and winked at David. He wanted David to tell the tomb he discovered now. If it can be suitable for the trial, then David will have more weight in Mr. Shi's heart. Mr. Shi, I do know a place, but I don't know if it is suitable for a trial. David saw Zhao Liguo's eyes, then got up and said. Shoo! Everyone stopped talking instantly and turned their attention to David. Mr. Chen, this trial place is not just a place. Zhao Waoqi reminded in a low voice beside David. He was afraid that if David mentioned a very ordinary cultivation place, he would be laughed at. David, right? Where are you talking about this place? Mr. Shi looked at David and asked with interest. Mr. Shi, it's on the outskirts of our capital. David said. As soon as David's words came out, there was an uproar in the audience. David, do you know what places are suitable for the trial? You dare to talk nonsense here. There are so many sects and families around the entire Kyoto. It's not necessarily how many times you have searched. Where else is suitable for trials? Place. Xian Yuanyan questioned David. You are talking nonsense. It is possible to say that you found some ruins and ancient tombs in other places. It is impossible in Kyoto. It has been searched many times here. It's just like talking. I can walk around Kyoto with my eyes closed. If there is such a place, I don't know. Young man, still floating, thinking that he killed Ichiro Watanabe, and Mr. Shi admired him, so he dared to talk nonsense. Everyone was talking about David, but no one believed what David said. David, do you know that such an occasion is not suitable for jokes? I think you still don't know what a trial is. You sit down first. Mr. Shi did not believe David's words at all. Hundreds of miles around the capital, they were afraid that they could not find a place to try, and they had already searched the surrounding area. But there was only one person who looked at David with a strange expression. This person was Hubeki. He seemed to have guessed what David wanted to say. Mr. Shi, although I don't know which place is suitable for the trial, the place I'm talking about is an emperor's tomb. If it has not been stolen and excavated, there must be a lot of things in it. David did not sit down, but continued to speak lightly. Imperial Mausoleum? Are you fucking hysterical? How could there be an undiscovered imperial mausoleum in Kyoto? Xian Yuankai immediately sneered at David. Everyone also began to laugh at David, thinking that David really dared to brag. However, Mr. Shi's face slowly cooled down, because David's words made him a little ugly. They did not know how many times they had probed the entire Kyoto. They discovered many of the imperial mausoleums that are currently being developed. Now David actually said that he found another imperial mausoleum in Kyoto. How is this possible? This is not talking about other people. Are they all trash? Mr. Chen, don't talk nonsense. Where else in the entire Kyoto is there any emperor's mausoleum? Seeing this, Zhao Waoqi hurriedly winked at David, telling David to stop talking. Chapter 946. However, David pretended not to see it and continued to say to Mr. Shi, this emperor's mausoleum is right next to the current emperor's mausoleum, and under that hilltop, if I'm not mistaken, that hilltop should be the seal of the emperor's mausoleum. This time, everyone was even more blown up. That place has now become a tourist attraction, and it receives countless people every day. If there is an emperor's mausoleum below it, how could it not be discovered? And Mr. Shi looked at David with his eyes narrowed. David, what you said is true. If there is nothing there, do you know what the words you said here today will bring you? Mr. Shi, I am willing to take responsibility for what I say. David said calmly. Seeing David so calm, Mr. Shi had some confidence in David's words, and others began to waver. Because no one would be stupid enough to deceive Mr. Shi on such an occasion, not to mention that David is not stupid. Mr. Shi, there is indeed an ancient tomb under the mountain, but it is not clear whether it is the tomb of the emperor. I found it some time ago. When I was trying to investigate it exactly, I came across this kid, disturbing me to use the 7-star array to investigate, otherwise I would have reported it long ago. At this time, Hubeki stood up and said. The ancient tomb that Hubeki first discovered, he initially planned to secretly dig it himself, but he did not want to be smashed by David, and now David actually sold the tomb with his favor. Hubeki was unhappy in his heart, so he stood up and wanted to take the credit for himself. After Hubeki said this, everyone really believed it. After all, the Hu family made a living by searching for caves and tombs. In this field, no one can compare to the Hu family. Now Hubeki said this, then the tomb in this place is stable. Mr. Shi glanced at Hubeki, and Mr. Shi would not believe what Hubeki said to report to the top. How could these aristocratic families share such good resources, but Mr. Shi did not pick out. Okay, I will send someone to investigate. If this place is the emperor's mausoleum, David, your credit is not small. After Mr. Shi finished speaking, he stepped out. Seeing that Mr. Shi was leaving, everyone stood up to see him off. Zhao Waoqi and David also hurriedly sent him out. David, Mu Xiu will be destroyed by Lin Feng. The protection of others can only be temporary. The only one who can shelter you is yourself. Before getting into the car, Mr. Shi patted David on the shoulder and said. David understood what Mr. Shi said and nodded slightly. If you want to live in this cruel society, you need your own strength, and relying on the protection of others is not a long-term solution after all. Mr. Shi left, and many people left one after another. If it weren't for Mr. Shi, the Dharma Protector Pavilion would not have the strength to invite them here. David, don't think that if you have a backer, I can spare you. This revenge of the broken arm will never be shared. You wait for me. Xuan Yuankai looked at David and gritted his teeth. Casual. David said indifferently. David's expression almost didn't make Xuan Yuankai angry, but here, he didn't dare to shoot David. After all, Mr. Shi just explained it. Xiao Kai, let's go. After Xuan Yuanyan gave David a cold look, he called his son to leave. He was also afraid that Xuan Yuankai couldn't help but attack David. Dad, do we just let David go? After leaving, Xuan Yuankai said with a face full of resentment. Snapped. Just after Xuan Yuankai finished speaking, Xuan Yuanyan slapped him. UBA5TARD, you almost buried our entire Xuan Yuan family just now, do you know that? You dare to question Mr. Shi, but you didn't see that Zhu Zishan was in the history. Don't you dare to F.art in front of Mr. Chapter 947. Xuan Yuankai covered his face with a look of grievance, then my arm will be broken in vain. Don't worry, since we can't kill that David outright, then we'll do it secretly. A strong murderous intent flashed in Xuan Yuanyan's eyes. At this time, Zhu Zishan and Long Jingguo walked out together at the entrance of the Protectorate Pavilion. After seeing David, both of them paused for a while. Obviously they had something to say to David, but no one said anything. Boy, you stole the credit of this old man, and today you are going to give me an explanation. At this moment, Hu Beiki angrily shouted at David. He originally discovered this ancient tomb first, but now David rushes to tell it and grabs the credit. How can Hu Beiki not be angry? Hu Beiki, make things clearer. Seeing Hu Beiki rushing over, Zhu Zishan asked. Although Hu Beiki said something about it at the celebration, it was obvious that Mr. Shi didn't believe it, or else he wouldn't say that the credit should be given to David. Leader, I discovered this ancient tomb first. I was exploring the tomb, and was smashed by this kid. Hu Beiki explained the events of that day in detail, and then said angrily, today he took this tomb. The location of the ancient tomb was revealed first, isn't this obviously taking my credit? I hope the leader of the alliance can call the shots. Zhu Zishan looked at David. David, what he said is the truth. If so, I think it is necessary to explain this matter to Mr. Shi. Yes. David nodded without hesitation, but then continued, it's just that he didn't really detect this ancient tomb at the time. After I left, why didn't he follow the leader of the alliance to report to you in time? Could it be that they, the Hu family, want to swallow this ancient tomb all by themselves? You are talking nonsense. Hu Beiki didn't know how to explain it. After all, it had been a few days. He knew why Hu Beiki didn't report to the Martial Arts Alliance as soon as possible. You can't be sure if there really is an ancient tomb there. After I leave, you must go to explore again, but you still haven't detected it, because the ancient tomb has been hidden by my magic circle, and you can't detect it. David looked at Hu Beiki like that, and directly dismantled him. Hu Beiki was speechless when he was said, and finally pointed at David and said, boy, wait for me, I will show you sooner or later. Hu Beiki left angrily, and Zhu Zishan looked at David and said with the attitude of an elder, your sharp edge is too exposed, this is not a good thing, even if someone protects you from behind, it is impossible to protect you for life. Yes, do it yourself. After Zhu Zishan finished speaking, he also left, while that Long Jingguo did not speak to David from beginning to end, but just looked at David with a half-smile expression. Everyone has left, and the Dharma Protector Pavilion has regained its calm. Mr. Chen, although Mr. Shi has said something, you'd better be more careful. I found that you have offended quite a few people. Zhao Waoqi looked at David helplessly and said. The road to cultivation is long, and there will always be stumbling blocks. If it is smooth sailing, I am afraid that I will never grow up. David smiled lightly. Zhao Waoqi didn't understand David. The reason why David did this was simply that he wanted to get more resources. If he wanted to increase his strength, he could not avoid these. And David couldn't practice slowly for a long time, because his mother was still suffering. Although David had never seen his mother, he knew that her mother must love him. As a son of man, he had responsibility to rescue his own mother. Chapter 948. Looking at David like that, Zhao Waoqi found that David's changes were getting bigger and bigger. He didn't know when it started. The young man he had looked down on in the past was gradually approaching the height he looked up to. On the other side, Long Jingguo had a gloomy expression on his way back to Long's house. Patriarch, Mr. Shi has spoken, what should we do? Long Xingxiu asked in a low voice. Do whatever you want. Mr. Shi just said that David couldn't be killed, but he didn't say that he couldn't be arrested. What I want is not David's life, what I want is his current identity, can you understand? Long Jingguo looked at Long Xingxiu and asked. Understood. Long Xingxiu nodded. Killing David is meaningless to Long Jingguo. All he needs is to catch David. After confirming David's identity, he threatens his sister Long Ruotong with David, saying that he has been asking 2 questions. The secret of more than 10 years is the main thing. Bring someone in person and go to the place, David said. If you choose that place after you have determined the experience, you can bring some more things to send to the leader of the alliance. If this is the Emperor's mausoleum, there are a lot of treasures in it. Long Jingguo's eyes narrowed slightly. I see, please rest assured, Patriarch. Long Xingxiu nodded. This time, Long Xingxiu went to participate. Everything he did now was done for himself. Long Xingxiu couldn't ignore it. After the celebration, David did not stay in Kyoto too much, but took Longwu and the others directly back to Horindal. Before returning to Horindal, David went to Yaishan Valley, refined the black jade intermittent paste, and brought it back together. When David rushed to the hospital with the black jade ointment, Lin Tianhu and Chifeng's men were very happy when they saw David coming. David looked at Lin Tianhu and Chifeng, who were lying in the hospital bed. Although the two were still lying on the bed and couldn't move, they were conscious and could communicate and talk normally, but their bones were broken and they couldn't move. Lin Tianhu still had a cigarette in his mouth, and there was a man beside him who was playing cigarette ashes. Looking at Lin Tianhu's appearance, he seemed to be very leisurely. Lin Tianhu, your whole body has been smashed to pieces, and you have become a waste. Are you still in the mood to smoke? David said jokingly. Mr. Chen, you have the ability to bring back the dead. As long as I, Lin Tianhu, have a breath, I'm not afraid. Lin Tianhu smiled. David also smiled helplessly, and then took out the black jade intermittent ointment. You are sure that I can cure you? If I can't help it, let's see if you can laugh. After speaking, David handed the black jade intermittent cream to his subordinates on the side. This thing is divided into 2 parts, one for oral administration and one for smearing, once a day, don't forget. Understood, Mr. Chen. The subordinate took the black jade intermittent paste and said respectfully. Mr. Chen, what is that thing you're holding? It looks black, isn't it harmful to the skin? Chifeng asked worriedly. David didn't expect Chifeng to be like this, and he was worried about his skin, so he couldn't help laughing. It was really hard to guess what this woman was thinking. This is the black jade intermittent cream. It can regenerate and heal bones, and it can also beautify the skin, making people's skin look like a newborn baby. David said lightly. When Chifeng heard this, she was immediately excited, and said to her subordinate, "Leave more of that black jade ointment for me, and Lin Tianhu can let him take it internally, don't apply it externally, his rough skin is useless." After Lin Tianhu heard it, he rolled his eyes, and the two of them were actually bickering. David looked at the two of them and smiled helplessly. After a while, he left. With the black jade intermittent paste, Lin Tianhu and Chifeng only needed a week to walk down the ground. Chapter 949 Pine Bay Villa. After knowing that Sonia and Gu Linger were back, both Ruben and Gu Wenchen rushed over. Ruben has not seen Sonia for a long time. When he saw Sonia back, Ruben was in tears and hugged Sonia tightly. Sonia saw that her father had aged a lot, and felt remorse in her heart. In order to follow David, she had been wandering outside, ignoring her father at home. "Dad, I'm sorry, I made you suffer alone." Sonia kept blaming herself. "Silly girl, I know you are following David to do big things. When you come back this time, Dad can feel the changes in you." Ruben is also happy for Sonia, who doesn't want to see their children have a bright future. Gu Wenchen was also holding Gu Linger's hand tightly at this moment. His most beloved granddaughter had also changed a lot at this moment, which made Gu Wenchen very gratified. David looked at the scene in front of him, and his heart was touched. He didn't know whether it was right or wrong to let Sonia and Gu Linger accompany him to run around and stay away from his relatives, or whether he was a little too selfish. But fortunately, they are all reunited now, and have a rare warm time. David also introduced Longwu to Ruben and Gu Wenchen. When the two knew that Longwu took special care of Sonia and Gu Linger, they were also very grateful to Longwu. In the evening, Ruben specially prepared a banquet at the Regal Hotel, and a group of people sat happily together for a meal. Gu Linger and Sonia both went back to their respective homes to rest, while David took Longwu, Xiaolan, and Wu Meyer to stay at their Pinerist villa. David let Longwu live here in the future. Although Horindal is a small town, the environment in Pine Bay is quite beautiful and suitable for old age. After settling everyone down, David took out a beast pill, which is the beast pill for swallowing the beast. Now David has reached the peak of the Great Master. After eating this beast pill, he may be able to break through to Wuzong. David the body can also form a golden elixir. After following Longwu's explanation, David went back to the room and closed the door directly, preparing to retreat for a period of time and break through to Wuzong. With Mr. Shi's words, David should be relatively safe during this period, but David doesn't know how long this kind of safety can be maintained, so he must seize all the time to cultivate. Although Longwu has no skill now, it is fortunate that Swalang is there, and Sonia, Gu Linger and Xiaolan can protect David if there is an enemy. David has nothing to worry about. Looking at the crystal clear animal pill in his hand, David swallowed it without hesitation. Immediately afterwards, an aura exploded in David's danshan, and the dragon crystal in David's body also seemed to be impacted, and a faint golden light began to appear. The aura in the beast pill combined with the aura emanating from Longjing had the opportunity to burst David's danshan. David quickly ran the heart concentrate art, constantly absorbing and refining these raging spiritual energy. David's forehead began to sweat cold, his whole body was like a ball, suddenly bulging, and then suddenly shrinking back. The severe discomfort caused David's brows to knit together. David knew that this kind of improvement in the realm was a big test, whether it was for his mind or body. If he couldn't hold on to it, it was very likely it will be devoured, and in the end, there will be no bones left. David's body began to glow with golden light, and David's golden body was brought to the extreme. Outside the room, Longwu looked at the golden light that was constantly flashing in the room, and his face showed a bit of relief. Chapter 950. 3 days later. On the Martial Arts Alliance forum, a piece of explosive news was posted by Zhu Zishan, the leader of the Martial Arts Alliance. The Emperor's Mausoleum was discovered on the outskirts of Kyoto. The Emperor's Mausoleum discovered this time is the largest in scale. After a simple excavation, no signs of the emperor's mausoleum were found. The Martial Arts Alliance researched and decided that this time, the martial arts trial will be in this emperor's mausoleum. Go ahead, and then an invitation will be issued, and the major sects and families who receive the invitation will actively prepare, and 10 days later, the trial will start on time. With just such a piece of news, the entire martial arts world was in a frenzy, and the imperial mausoleum was really discovered in Kyoto. As you can imagine, almost all the aristocratic sects began to be ready for this trial, fully prepared, and hoped that they could receive the invitation. At the same time, in the hall of the Long family, Long Jingguo called all the senior members of the Long family for a meeting. The trial this time was extraordinary, and the Long family had to pay attention to it. Long Xingxiu, follow the news you have received to the elders and protectors. Long Jingguo said to Long Xingxiu. Yes. Long Xingxiu nodded, and then said, this time, I took someone to the scene to visit the tomb. This is indeed an emperor's tomb. The gloomy wind was blowing, and sounds could be faintly heard in the ancient tomb. No one knows what will be inside, but now where the Martial Dao Alliance has sent people to handle it, they can only approach it during the trial. I sent some things to the leader of the alliance, and I got an invitation list from the leader of the alliance. The master and the guardians, the elders take a look. Long Xingxiu said, took out a document, and then put one in front of everyone. If you want to get the most benefit from this trial, of course, you must know yourself and the enemy. Long Jingguo held the list and frowned slightly. Patriarch, is there anything wrong? Long Xingxiu asked hurriedly with a panic in his heart. It is not easy for him to get the opportunity of this trial, and he must not make mistakes. This David is actually on the trial list. Long Jingguo asked. Yes, I asked Alliance leader Zhu, this is what Mr. Shi meant. After all, David discovered this imperial mausoleum and told it to Mr. Shi. Long Xingxiu nodded. This David has countless enemies. If he goes to participate in the trial, it is definitely impossible for him to come out alive with his little ability. Long Jingguo's face was gloomy. He wanted David to live, because David's life was still useful to him, but if he died in the mausoleum, a dead David would have no value to Long Jingguo. Patriarch, why don't we protect David during the trial? Long Xingxiu carefully asked Long Jingguo's opinion. No, this trial is no trivial matter. How can we devote our energy to protecting David? There must be a lot of treasure resources in such a huge imperial mausoleum. We must plunder the resources as soon as possible, so as not to be used by other sects. The Menchi family took the lead. Long Jingguo shook his head without hesitation. Then what should we do? Long Xingxiu asked in embarrassment. Long Jingguo hesitated for a moment, then looked at an old man on his right and said, Great Protector, the 5 of you have worked hard to go to Horindal to arrest David, but you must act in secret. It is best not to expose yourself. This David cannot be allowed to participate in the trial. As ordered, the Great Protector got up, and then left with several other protectors. The 5 guardians of the Long family are all in the realm of Wuzong, each of which has surpassed the 5th grade Wuzong, and the strength of the 5 people is comparable to that of a sect family.